But basically my whole goal today is something that Kirk asked me, is just an overview of soil moisture probes and how to use them, the agronomic side, what they do, and basically you as a farmer, how do you use it? How's it going to be useful to you? So as we go along, if you guys have any questions at all, just holler. We'll stop and do all that stuff. And I will leave some room at the end for any questions you guys have. So just a quick example. This is our equipment. It's what we use. Everything out in the field. This would be our communications tower that speaks back to us. That gives us all the data that comes from the probe. It's a 4-foot probe. There is a sensor every 4 inches. So you get 12 sensors in that 4-foot profile. And the sensors are looking out horizontally. There's no vertical data being pulled, so you're seeing the soil layer by layer, every 4 inches down. And again, that's communicated back to us through cellular towers, whether it be GSM or CDMA, which is Verizon and or AT&T. The data is collected by the comm tower every 15 minutes, and it's transmitted back to our servers once an hour. So when you look at the data, and we'll get to that in a second, it's for all intents and purposes, you're seeing live data. I mean, in the plant's life, there's not, basically you're getting live data. So you're getting 15-minute increments. Just briefly, some of the things, what you would use a probe for, as you can see here. It's really to make you guys money, to be more efficient with water, your irrigation practices, but it's controlling the pivot speed, timing of it, better use of fertilizer, and overall improving your irrigation efficiency. And that's one thing that I've talked to a lot of guys about is some guys have a lot of water, but they find out they were being very inefficient with their water. And the 3-4-5 program's proven a lot of that too. Some guys have very, very little water and have found out they can use their little water even better. And maybe that's not necessarily through pivot speed and stuff like that. They're able to see what residue management is doing for them. You know, if you've got a probe in the side where you've done more conventional type tillage versus heavier or full no-till, you're able to see how water is able to, whether it be infiltrate the soil or how long it stays in the soil. So there's really no end to the use of a moisture probe in the water management, fertilizer management realm. I mean, it's like if you broke your arm, you may know it's broken, but until you look at an x-ray, you don't know where it's broken, you don't know how to fix it. And it's the same way with our irrigating and under the ground. You may know something's not right, but until you can see what's going on, you don't know what's broken and you don't know how to fix it. And that's the basic idea of what we're trying to do with any type of soil moisture monitoring. So now we're just gonna go through some basic data. Not all this is showing up. I don't know why it's not, but you don't need the banners. So when you log on, if you had some probes in your field, for all you new users, this is what you would see. This would be your area. Everywhere you have a probe, there's a pin. Here, there's a list of your fields and what's going on. Everything's color coordinated to let you know whether you're out of water, you've got good moisture, whether you're over your full point, and I'll show that to you in a second. But this is immediately what you'd see. If you have one probe or if you have 40 probes, they'll all be on this map with all your fields listed here. And when you click on it in a field, whether you click on the pin and or over here, it's gonna pull up your summary graph. And this is what you're gonna see. So before everybody gets crazy, those of you guys haven't seen it, I know it looks like an EKG, but this is the summary of everything that's going on underground. So all 12 sensors summarized into this one graph. And I'll come back to this picture, but what we're seeing here is what is actually happening underground. So every spike is an irrigation event, and as water is being pulled, you see this stair-stepping event, and that's literally day and night. The crop pulls during the day and rests at night, so you get this flat line during the night, or a relatively flat line, and that's why you see the stair-stepping. And so you see water being pulled out. The larger the step, obviously the more water you pulled, and you can watch that over the season, whether it be during flowering, where, you know, pre-tassel, tassel, and corn, where your water use goes straight through the roof. In sorghum, you know, pre-boot to boot, that pushing out that head an extreme amount of moisture, and those are the things you'll see, those stair steps get really big. A hot, dry, windy day. Some of you guys are familiar, if you had a probe back in 2011 on that Father's Day, I mean, basically your stair step was the width of your graph. So that's the basics. So another thing you'll see here, we've got a blue line and a red line or an orange line. Blue line is your full point. Red line is what we call a refill point. And I'm always trying to remember or tell guys, it's not a you're out of water line. It is a protect your yield line. As you can see right here, you're able to pull below this. But our goal with this technology is to give you the best yield possible. Somewhere down below this line, there is a wilting point. And once you hit that, yields drop drastically. And so we're trying to protect your yield and keep you from finding that. So this is what you're seeing. The green band is what we call the optimal growing band. And basically it's the water use curve. This is a corn crop, and I mean, this is just your water use efficiency curve. As you head towards flowering, your water use goes up, and your ability to water in this part of the world or to keep up with that demand goes down. And so, you know, you see this curve, and if you can stay within the green band all season, water's typically not going to be your yield limiting factor. It's going to be environment, weeds, insects, hailstorms, whatever the case may be. But typically, and the whole idea of that is basically you're keeping your top 2 foot relatively happy and healthy, because that's 80% of your yield comes from the top 2 foot of your soil. So does that make sense before I go any further? Lines go up, irrigation into rainfall, lines going down, you're actually pulling it out of the soil. And so you can see patterns, in which we'll get into this later, of how you're doing over the season, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. So to come over to this picture, for a new user, it really tends to help guys. So everything in this picture is what's going on here put into a picture form. So you can see your corn crop, as you root down, the probe picks it up, and your roots will grow in. And I'll tell you right now, I would eventually train you on how to look at the graph, because this is not always, unfortunately, 100% right. It's an algorithm, mathematical formula, trying to interpret what the human eye sees, and, well, the human eye is a lot better than a mathematical formula sometimes. But 90% of the time it works very well, so you can quickly look at this, see, okay, I've got, my roots are down to 20 inches, however deep your last irrigation went, this will highlight green, will be redundant, tell you over here, tell you when it was, how deep it went, so you can say, okay, I've got roots of 20 inches, my last irrigation only went 8. And you can function management-wise off of that. You'll see this gas gauge over here, a dual gas gauge. What we've done here is we've got where you're actively pulling from, and then your profile down here, so that's all 12 sensors and where you're pulling from. So the idea there is early season, you may have roots only down to 12 inches, and you can dry that out, but under that 12 inches, you may be relatively full. So you can see this right here, early season, approaching the empty, but down here, you're still at 3/4 of a tank. So that just kind of lets you overall know that, hey, it's not as dire as it looks. I've got a lot of water underneath, but I am dry at top. Does that make sense to everybody? And more information just here. We're pulling in local weather data, days to empty. That's something that we're going to put in there. As you're pulling down, basically we're projecting forward as to when you will go across this red line. So that's just a quick thing for you as you're going through between irrigation passes. Hey, I've got 7 days left before I hit my red line, my refill point. And you know in your head, my sprinkler will be back in 4. So just a quick look through your stuff, you know you're good. This just show you those colored pins I showed you on the front, that first page. Let me go back there just real fast. So these colored pins here, they're green and blue. This just kind of show you where you are on the graph when you look at that map. If you have a blue pin, you're at or above the full point. Green means you're in this band. Yellow means you've dropped below the band, but you're still above the refill point. Red means you're at or below your refill point. So that gives you quick indication. If you look at your map, you can look at green, blue, and be like, okay, we're good. And you can just go click on all your yellow and red probes if you had, you know, say 40 or 50 of them. Just quick information for you. So let's go a little deeper with the agronomic side of it. What are we going to do? Our main thing in this part of the world is we're basically doing root zone management. With this information, you can know how deep your roots are, depth of infiltration of irrigation and or rainfall, and if you're fertigating, it is critical to know where your roots are and how deep your irrigations are going, because you don't want to push fertilizer below your root zones. And then another big thing, especially this time of year, is when can I shut off? Am I done watering? So we'll go through all these real fast, and like I said, stop me if you have any questions. So depth of root zone, how do we know how deep your roots are? And that's a great question. So the graph we originally showed you was the summary graph. This is the graph of all 12 sensors. So you're seeing each individual zone. We're going to tell you over here how deep each one is, color-coded, so you can see what's happening at each 4-inch layer. So just like the overall summary, when you see a spike, you've seen water hit that zone. When you see stair-stepping, you see water being pulled out of that zone. So that's how we know where your roots are. When we see stair-stepping happen at 12 inches, we know that you're having that diurnal or that day and night water pull. And there's only one thing that can do that, and that's a plant root. Now, whether it's your crop or your weeds, I can't tell you, but something is pulling water out of your ground, and that's good for you guys to know. So that's exactly how you would know where your roots are. And this is where I would tell any guy in here who uses probes or wants to use probes, always come to this page. You will know exactly what's taking place at every 4-inch layer, and what the human eye can do is so much better than what a mathematical formula do. So I would tell anybody in this room, if you have them or want them, this is the graph you really need to study the most, so you can see what's happening at each individual layer. And then we'll keep on going. Water infiltration. So how deep did your irrigation go? Well, just what I was telling you, when you see a spike, water hit that sensor. Okay, so if you see it spike up here, this is 20 inches here, this is 24, you know that water hit these zones. Does that make sense? Can you guys see that back there? If you look at these lines before this happened over here, you can see they're flat line. Nothing is happening to these lines down here prior to what's going on right here. So this particular grower was not pushing water very deep until, somewhere around July the 13th. So one thing we want to look at, probably not too many of you guys will see drainage unless you have super sandy soils or you just happen to have big water. And I know there's a few pockets left, but just so you know, or maybe we just have a really wet summer, which is great. So what we're looking at here is we want to see, are you overwatering? Do you have drainage? So the probe cannot lie. If it sees water, it will show up. So you'll always see a spike in the line. Always see that spike up if water goes by that sensor. Okay, so what we're looking for is, can my ground hold any more water? So I'm going to go back to this graph here and show you guys something. So can you guys see right here where my finger's at? So before this spike, can you see the orange line is right about here? Okay, after the irrigation event, the line goes up and then it kind of flattens out right about in here. If you can see that, we captured, and zoomed in, we captured water. The line went up and it stayed up. Does that make sense? Okay, so that layer of soil could hold more water. If it cannot, just like you see here, the line is here, it sees the moisture and immediately comes straight back down. That soil it is full, it can't hold any more water. And you can see that for just about all these layers all the way down this probe. And so if you have big water or wet season, sandy soil, whatever the case may be, and you want to know if you have drainage, those are the indications you're looking for. It just can't hold any more water. And so in this particular situation, I believe this was on the 212 project back in 2013 or 14, I can't remember exactly, it was 14, I believe. This guy, you can see every irrigation pass, he pushed water, and this is when we still had the 60-inch probes that worked. That was for you, Tom. This is 60 inches way down here, guys. This is 5 feet. This little light blue line here is 24 inches. And what I'm wanting you to see here, everything below 24 inches never captured water. He only was pulling water from 24. You don't see any stair stepping below that. And so every time he irrigated, he pushed water all the way down to 5 feet and was only pulling water from 24 inches. I can't remember, Leon told me, I think the yield in this particular field was like 165 or 175. And it could have been a lot better. It could have been a whole lot better. But you know, he pushed a lot of fertilizer every time he irrigated, way down here. And he probably drowned it out a little bit up top. It's something that you mentioned earlier, Tom. Just by having so much water, he never let it dry out. So he killed himself on yield. And so if you guys have that opportunity and you have that kind of water, I mean, you have two choices. Let it dry down some, or prepare yourself for 175 bushel corn. It'll save you a lot of money, you know. So either way, that's something you want to look at. This is probably something more of this area we'll see, and I'm just trying to show you guys how we use this with lighter water. And so I want to show you guys what happens if we underwater. In other words, if we run our pivot too slow, what takes place. So what we're going to look at is, when you look at this summer graph, one of the things you can see are your trends. You can see where you are today. So if I came over here and looked at this graph here, I can see where I'm at today. Here's my full point, here's my refill, and I can see I'm right here. I can see where I've been by looking backwards in time. You can see, okay, I was over here at one point in the season, and now I'm way down here. And you can ask that question, okay, why? What's taking place? Am I losing ground or am I gaining ground? As you can see here, this particular guy is losing ground, and he's losing ground fast. I know you guys can't see these dates, but trying to see on my computer. This right here is about the 1st of July, somewhere in here. Okay? So he is about 2 weeks out from tassel, and his irrigation peaks. Every time he irrigates, he's losing ground. And so he came to me and we talked about this. He's like, Russ, what's going on? And so I'm gonna skip ahead real fast. And so we came here and we looked at, this is the sensor graph for that, and we looked at what was going on. And what we found was this. This is early season where he's losing ground, and his water's really only going, you see these big spikes, this blue line is 8 inches. It's really only hitting 8 inches here. Finally hit 16 about right here, but there's not a very big jump in his moisture gain. And so he comes to me and he's like, man, I'm losing ground. Well, all along this time, you can see he's starting to root down. He's rooting down here at 12, he's rooting down here at 16, and then 20, and so forth. So as that crop gets bigger, it's using more water, it's rooting down deeper. So he's pulling more out of his bank. He goes from $20 withdrawals every day to $100 withdrawals, and he's still only putting $5 back in his bank account, and he's about to go upside down. And he asked me why. So we could come in here and we could see, this goes back to, okay, where are my roots at and how deep am I pushing my moisture? So he's using more, he's putting back. So what we talked about, it was so late in the season, I said, if we can slow down just a little bit, not too drastic 2 weeks before tassel, but just a little bit, see if you can start gaining some ground. Well, you'll notice right here, this is our 48-inch line, right here, he slowed down enough to push water deep. And you see a little spike there, and a little spike there, and the spikes get a little bit bigger with time. And I want to go backwards real fast and show you what happened. So when he came to me and we did this, he actually got really lucky. Praise God for that, where he caught a rain and then he slowed his pivot down, and then you were able to see where he was able to maintain a pretty decent water level for the rest of the season. All based off of irrigation management. He didn't add water, we didn't take away water, but it was the way he was running his pivot. He was being very inefficient with his water. And so what happened was, when he pushed water deeper, his irrigation, he was able to capture more water. Why? Because he was pushing it deeper. And that's what I was showing you guys a while ago, right here. He started filling his profile instead of just filling the top 8 to 16 inches. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes, sir.
Do you have the soil temperature tied into that to see what the soil temperature did right there?
I do not. It's good information. I don't have it available now, but I could go get it if anybody needs that, especially.
I've had that thought before, and I didn't want to
Yeah.
start watching that.
I have not. This was this data actually came from 2014 as well. Sometimes when I find great examples, I like to hold on to them just for such an occasion as this. So yeah, this is 2014 data. But maybe you can tell us about that here in a little bit. I know you've got some good information on soil temperature. Good ideas then. And I'm glad Tom brought that up. We do measure, and I didn't tell you guys that, we do measure not only soil moisture with these probes, we're measuring electroconductivity and temperature at every 4-inch layer. And there has been an idea that temperature is correlated with water use efficiency within the plant. And Tom has shown me some, if y'all want to know some stuff, talk to Mr. Tom Moore here. This guy knows more about probes than I do, but he showed me some really interesting things with his probes and temperature and water, and it is amazing. But I don't have that in this presentation. So anyway, that's running our pivots too fast. Again, it's just one example of what we can do. Just some more information. So if you are fertigating, which I imagine most of us in here are, just knowing that information we just went through, where your roots are, and how deep you're pushing your water is critical, especially if you're using a precision fertigation program early season before, I mean, all of you guys are going to push roots deep. In this part of the world, if you don't, then we've either had a really wet year or you have big water. But, you know, if you're mid-June and you're putting on that precision fertigation pass where you need, I don't know, 15 units, and you only have roots down to 20 inches and you're pushing water 48, you have a decision to make. You know, if you need those 15 units to make sure you hit that yield, you do not want to push any of that 15 units below your actively pulling roots. And so that allows you to make a decision. I don't know what that decision is. Is that pump more on? Is that speed your pivot up so that you don't go as deep? Those are only decisions you guys can make in June 15th, depending on weather and all that stuff. But that's the kind of information that'll be key to holding on to the yields you're looking at and that you budgeted for. You can use the EC, electroconductivity, to just track those things as well. If you have salty water, it works really good. If you're putting on affluent water, you can watch salt buildups or, you know, washing out. If you don't, you are able to track nitrogen movements. We're not telling you how much, you're just able to see it move, which is very handy. So now to the final irrigation. Sorry, again, my thing is cut off. And I really wish I could squish that down just a little bit. You can't see my dates down here, but here's the whole idea, guys. So once we hit black layer, you have roughly 2 weeks of water usage left, depending on variety. Some need a little more, some need a little less, and I know some that's weather dependent, but an overall good average is 14 days of water usage left. So on graph 1, if we're hit black layer, you can see my line somewhere down here. And you know you have roughly 2 weeks of water usage left. You're going to want to put that last pass of water on. You're going to hurt your yield, possibly have some lodging issues if you continue on from here and shut down. Don't short yourself at the very end. You've already dumped a lot of money into this crop. Don't save $5 an acre to lose 20. Okay? The other scenario is here. We hit black layer and you can see, obviously this guy was really full. That's a scenario where you should have 2 weeks of water usage left, and you know, if nothing else, you can at least watch it. And in this situation, if it was me, I'd be like, I'm probably done. Unless we're 105 degrees every day and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour. And then you have the ability to watch this over time, and if you do drink it super fast, you can say, okay, well, let's just throw on a quick 3/4, 1 inch pass just to suffice for an extra few days. The last thing is too, also, if you do have a tendency to want to overwater, you know you're going to be harvesting somewhere right here. And you do not want a full tank if you can keep from it right before harvest. Because if we get an October rain and you're pretty full, it's going to take you forever to dry down out in that field. And I know you can't help it sometimes, but if you can, you know, try to plan your harvest where you're pretty empty and you do happen to catch an inch, inch and a half rain, you'll be back in the field a whole lot quicker than if you ended right up here. So those are just some really easy agronomic ways you can use this, specifically at the end of the season. And really right here, you can pay for this stuff in one simple decision making there. I want to hit some others real fast, just how else. This is corn, summer crop. A lot of guys are starting to use it in more fall and or cover cropping situations. Most people want to know if it's a winter cover crop, say wheat or something like that. You want to know when it breaks dormancy because you want to kill it typically in the spring. With a probe in the ground, what will typically happen in the winter is it'll flatline. And when it breaks dormancy, you'll see this line drop and it'll start stair-stepping on you. So this was actually wheat right here that went to grain. But you can see exactly when that wheat broke dormancy. And the same thing goes for your cover crops. So that way you can say, okay, it's time to kill this stuff. I don't want to drink all the winter moisture I held on to. If you are happen to grow wheat for grain and you're pushing it for yield and not just the red-headed stepchild, as you can see here, to make a good wheat crop, man, you need a lot of water. And this was in 2015 where we got a lot of late April, May rains, and you can see every time this particular grower drank it. Now he wound up making like 105 bushel on that, but he called me one day, he's like, Russ, have you looked at my graph? I was like, no, not really. I forget I have wheat probes out there. He's like, this is why we don't make good wheat anymore. We don't put enough water on. You know, everybody used to row water, but now with pivots, we're only putting out maybe 2 inches a pop instead of that 6 inches a pop. And most guys probably only do it 2 or 3 times. So anyway, that's wheat and or cover crop. Other things we're starting to see a lot of is in alfalfa. I don't know how many of you guys might be hay guys, but just an example of alfalfa. Not saying about that, it's more of a permanent cropping system. So you'll put it in, leave it in, and you'll get year-round data. But just, you know, letting you know, guys letting it dry down prior to swathing and then baling and everything, and then watching it fill back up, letting it dry down again before harvest. And then you can see where the crop goes into dormancy. You're able to watch your winter moisture. How good did those snows or the ice storm do for me? You know, so you can kind of watch your buildup prior to dormancy breaking. Well, he built up a little bit, but he had a long way to go for his alfalfa crop when he started drinking water again. So you can see the irrigations that he made in order to build his crop back up. So just another example of how you could use it. For another cropping system, I see more alfalfa being planted up here. But that would go for any hay type crop if you're getting more than one cutting. So just for you guys, I know money's a big deal. I mean, this is where it's at. You know, you're saving on putting water into the ground if you're able to not water once at the end of the year, or maybe early season, or perhaps you do get a rain when you can go look at your probe and see, hey, that rain did me a lot of good. It went all the way down. Or you can say, well, that rain came in 20 minutes. It sealed off the top of my ground and only went 12 inches deep. So you can judge really quick. Maybe I should shut my wells off. Maybe I shouldn't. You can judge whether or not you should turn them on sooner or later. I know a lot of guys in the last few years have done that. They'll watch their probes to know when to turn their sprinklers back on. Again, with your fertilizer program, which will overall increase your yields. But at the end of the day, you should be increasing yields if you're a better irrigator. I mean, that's just hands down. You should see better return on that. And if you can save water, then you're going to save money and plus have something there for the future. So, and that goes back to increased sustainability. I mean, we have to keep this going for years to come. And so if we can save an inch this year and you do that over 2 million acres, that's a lot of inches of water. And this is just an easy illustration of where that payback is coming from. And these are just examples of what we've seen from growers, anywhere from a 10 to 40% yield increase. And I always tell everybody that 40% is real. It is not very common, but it has happened. We had one guy up in the Texoma region grow an extra 180 acres of corn because he realized how much he was overwatering. So therein you see that big 40% increase. It's not always the case. But that 10 to 15% is quite common. So that's where it's at, guys. That's all I have. If you guys have any questions or thoughts, I'll answer them. All right, that's all I have. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Russ.
You bet.